It's TK Friday. On today's episode, I will be doing a masking workshop. We'll be looking at luminosity masks, zone masks, color masks, and saturation and vibrance masks. We're going to take a deep dive into masking today. My name's Dave Kelly, and this is The Joy of Editing. Stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. Thanks for joining me again today. Well, last week I asked the question if anybody wanted me to do a masking workshop, and a lot of you out there said, yes, Dave, please do it. So that's what I'm doing today. By the way, if you don't yet own the TK8 plugin for Photoshop, you can click on my affiliate link found in the description below this video. Just click on that link. It'll take you to the TK web store where you can purchase the TK8 plugin for Photoshop along with training videos. And if you use my promo code DK15, you'll save 15% off your entire purchase. And when you do that, you're supporting The Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. And for that, I truly thank you. Today I'll be working on 3 different images for my examples, and these are from Adobe Stock. Now, Adobe offers all of you out there that have the photography plan where you get Lightroom and Photoshop, you can get free stock images right from Adobe, and it's really easy to do, and I'll show you how to do it, because I'm going to give you the stock numbers for these 3 images that you'll be able to download, but you're going to have to do it this way. Also, on an upcoming video, I will do a video showing you how to get stock images and how to organize them and things of that nature, so that'll be coming soon on The Joy of Editing. To download these images, all you're going to need to do is click on your Creative Cloud icon, wherever that is on your computer. I'm on a Mac and mine is up here in the menu bar. Then just click on the Creative Cloud icon and this will come up. And you'll notice up here is a menu, Home, Apps, Files, Discover, Stock and Marketplace. What you want is Stock and Marketplace. So click on Stock and Marketplace. And then you see another menu here. What you want to do is click on Free. This is absolutely free. This is part of your Adobe Photography Plan subscription, by the way. And they have some great images here. Like I said, I will be doing a video on this, how to open images up inside of Photoshop, all that kind of stuff. So you're going to want to stay tuned for that in an upcoming Joy of Editing video. And also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And click that bell notification icon. When I put that video out, you'll be notified about that. And also, when you like, share, and subscribe, you're helping to support The Joy of Editing because more people will see my videos. There's an algorithm with YouTube, and more people will see my channel when you do that. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. Okay, now that you're here in the Stock and Marketplace under free, just go ahead and type in the numbers that you'll find in the description below this video. And you'll notice I typed in the number of this first image. It's 105,894,082. Then just type your enter or return key and your internet file browser will open up. If you've already downloaded an image, it'll say re-download for free, but I believe for the first time it'll say license for free here. I'm pretty sure, but just click on that and it'll download it into your downloads folder, and then you could just open it up inside of Photoshop. But you'll have to search each one of those numbers, okay? So to search again, just type a new number up here in the search bar and type return enter and get the next image. You get the drift. Let me start out by talking about luminosity masks and zone masks. Now, when should you use a zone mask? When should you use a luminosity mask? And I think this will really help you out. So let me go ahead and click on the luminosity mask button. And you're going to notice we have our lights 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And when you click across here, this is lights 1, this is lights 2, and you notice we're narrowing down to the lightest lights, lights 3. The lesser lights will drop off, and the lighter lights will stay. Here's lights 4, lights 5, and lights 6, and that's that lightest area right there. And then darks, I'll click on darks 1, so here's darks 1, and the range keeps narrowing down, darks 2, darks 3, darks 4, darks 5, and darks 6. And the light areas are the very darkest darks. And by the way, if you don't want to generate a mask after opening up the luminosity mask, just click on this X and they go away. So let me say this about luminosity masks. And I'll talk about lights first. Whenever you want to include the lightest lights in a mask, then a lights luminosity mask is what you want. Whenever you want to include the darkest darks in a luminosity mask, then a darks luminosity mask is the mask that you want. Now let's talk about midtones. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the luminosity masks again. Now midtones, let me click on, we have 3 midtones. We have a midtones 1, a midtones 2, and a midtones 3. They're all midtones. They're just getting progressively lighter as we go. Now, let me say this about a midtones mask. A midtones mask, and this is very important, is a no lights or a no darks mask. So you notice right here in this black area right here, that is the lightest area of the image right in here, and it's not selected. And I believe down in the black areas down in here, these are the darkest shadows, so they're not included. And so whenever you don't want to include the lightest lights or the darkest darks, then you want a midtones luminosity mask. And when I always open up my full edits and I do that midtones 3, which is what you're seeing right now, that's why I say, if you want to protect your shadows and highlights from clipping, use a midtones 3 and then apply it to a color grading tool. And that is what protects me from clipping highlights and shadows, this midtones mask. Remember, a midtones mask will not contain any dark tones or any light tones. It's only going to include midtones only. So it's a great mask. And it's also a great mask if you want to just lighten up midtones. And I do that all the time in my full edits. For instance, I'll take a midtones 1. It's the darkest of the mask. So it's going to be a more subtle adjustment. And then I'll apply it to a curves adjustment layer. And I'll change it to the screen blend mode. And you see how it just gently lightens up those midtones. And then I have an opacity that I can pull back. So that's a great use for it. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click on the trash can and get rid of that layer. And now to recap, if you want to include the lightest lights in a mask, or if you want to make a mask to include the darkest darks, you want a luminosity mask. Or if you want a mask just to target the midtones of the image, a luminosity mask is great for that. And now let's talk about zone masks. I will be demonstrating all these masks, but I feel it's important that you really understand what each of these masks do up front. A zone mask. This is a mask that will include a specific tonal range, somewhere in between lights and darks. And it also has a benefit of some really cool sliders in it. You always hear me talk about let's tighten and lighten. Well, we're going to get into that, but let's go ahead and open up the zone masks. So let me click this icon right here, open up your zone masks. But first, you have to pick a zone. For instance, if I wanted to target this zone right here, like this little dark strip along here, if I click on that and click OK, you will notice it is sitting right here. This slider can be moved and adjusted, by the way, but you'll notice that this zone sits between a 2 and a 3. This is the slider to lighten up the selection. I call it a selection. We're making a mask, but the light areas will be the selected areas. And then we can tighten those areas by dragging this slider into the left, which is really cool. And you don't get this in a luminosity mask, but you do get it in a zone mask. And I find that the zone mask is a mask that I use probably more often than any other mask. Now, as a side note, to refine a luminosity mask, you can use any of these tools here to do it. But more often than not, I use this levels adjustment. It's kind of like a tighten and lighten situation here, but it's different. But you do have that ability to do that in a luminosity mask too. But here, it's just right here using these 2 sliders for refinement. It's quick and easy, and more often than not, that's all you need to do. And now comes a tip. When should I use a luminosity mask versus a zone mask? Well, let me show you. See this button here? It looks like a little eyedropper. Just click on that. And when you do, you see your image again. And your color picker comes up. And so here's my tip. Let's click on the light area right here. So I'm going to click this and click OK. And now we can immediately see where that sits in the zone. It's way past the zone 9. It's at a 250. So it's very, very light. Probably not a good candidate for a zone mask. Here's my tip for you. If you use this eyedropper tool and you click somewhere on the image, let me just click right here and click OK. And you'll notice that sits in between 2 and 8. Whenever you pick a zone, and if it's somewhere in between zones 2 and 8, it's the perfect candidate for a zone mask. And so that should be really helpful to you. The zone mask can be a helpful tool to determine whether you do need to use a luminosity mask or a zone mask. So let me show you. Let's click on the eyedropper tool again. And now let me pick like a dark area right down in here and click OK and see where that zone hits. See, that zone hits under a zone 1. So again, it's not a good candidate for a zone mask. So I would want to use a luminosity mask for that. Doesn't mean I couldn't use a zone mask, because you can, but really a luminosity mask would probably be a better choice. And now let me go ahead and click the eyedropper tool again, and let's click like right in this area here and click OK. And now we can see that this is a little bit over zone 8, so I could probably use a luminosity mask or a zone mask. Let's try another spot, like maybe right here. Let's click OK. And now we can see that this sits at right at a zone 5. So this again would be a good candidate for a zone mask. And then don't forget, you got the tighten slider, so we can really tighten up that area and really select it really well, tighten it up, and then we can lighten it up and really get it to where it's really isolating that area. Then I could output it to a color grading tool, curves adjustment, whatever we want to output it to, but we'll get into that later. But right now I'm explaining this stuff to you. So now you know that if it's between a zone 2 and an 8, a zone mask is really good for you. If it's a 1 or under or a 9 or over, it's a good candidate for a luminosity mask. And so you can see here, you can use a zone mask to determine, do I need a luminosity mask or do I need a zone mask? Especially if you're starting out with a TK8 plugin for Photoshop, I think this tip can be very helpful for you. After a while, you just get to know exactly what you're doing and you don't need to do that. But starting out, this might be a good way to learn. And now, how about a couple examples for luminosity masks and zone masks? So let's go ahead and use this test method. Let me click on the eyedropper tool, and we're going to go to this light area right here, and I click OK, and I see, well, that sits at 251 here above a 9. I would probably want to use a luminosity mask to adjust that light area. Okay, so I'm going to click X to get out of here. Now, these light areas I'd like to tone down a little bit, and to do that, I can use a curves adjustment layer in a multiply blend mode to darken up those really light areas. So I'm determining that I need a luminosity mask. So I'll click on the luminosity mask button. I want to narrow this selection down more to this really light area. So I'm going to work down through here. Here's a 2, lights 2. Here's a lights 3. Here's a lights 4. Here's a lights 5. That's probably too isolated. So I'm going to go to a lights 4. And also note, by default, we're set for RGB, red, green, and blue, but we can isolate this to a red channel, green channel, blue, cyan, magenta, or yellow. And to do that, you just click through here. In other words, I am on a lights 4. Let's check the red channel. And see, that's not targeting enough of the areas. Here's a green. That's pretty good. Here's a blue. Wow, way too broad. Here's a cyan. Still too broad. Here's magenta. And here's yellow. Not good either. So in this case, I think I'll just use RGB. It's a good idea to test these different channels out to see if you can get the isolation that you want. So I'm just using RGB. Okay, and now I need to output this. And I'm just going to output it and have this effect go over the entire image. And to do that, I need to pick an output source here. And remember, I said I want to use a curves adjustment layer. So I'll click on this, and it attaches that mask to the curves adjustment layer. And now I want to change the blend mode to multiply to darken all those really light lights. And I'll just click it, and you see what happens there. Now, if I don't want it in the foreground here, and you can see right up in here, it's done a great job. So just look at the sky. Here's the before and here's the after. See how it's toned down those really hot lights up there. Now, if I don't want it here, I can just click on this mask, click on the select sky button. It'll select the sky. Photoshop will select the sky for us. And once I have that selected, I can invert it so I can get the foreground. And then I can use this fill button right here and fill that with black, click OK, and now it removes it from the foreground. Now you can see I have marching ants here. I can just click this button right here to deselect my selection here. But here's the before and here's the after, only up in the sky. Now today I'm not getting into mask calculations and all that stuff. This is basically just a masking workshop, okay? I might do another tutorial where I get into more specific things like more elaborate masking techniques using calculations and all that stuff. Okay, now for the next thing I want to do, you see these darker areas right in here? I want to darken them up more just to build up a little more contrast here. And to do that, what I always like to do is use a curves adjustment layer. I'll put a black mask on it to hide what I'm going to do right now, because I'm going to put this in a multiply blend mode, which will darken the entire image. But we don't see the image has gotten darker because of this black mask. Now let me click on the zone mask here and let's check this out. Let's find some of these darker tones like right in here. And you can see that's where it sits. I'll click OK. So that's right around the zone 4. And it's really isolating that area. Now it follows my tip. It's between a zone 2 and an 8, so a zone mask is perfect for that. So now I can drag this tightening slider to the left and really isolate those dark tones in there. They're not super dark, they're right around a zone 4, and then I can lighten it up so they'll take the effect a little stronger. So I'm going to go ahead and really lighten that up to right around there. And now I'm going to output it to a black mask, painting with a white brush through a selection, because I want to paint this on. And I'm going to use about, I'll start with 20% opacity. I'll type my 2 key, and I have a nice soft edge brush. It doesn't really matter that much, but I'm just going to start painting over these areas. And see how I can just darken those. Isn't that cool? So really nice. And by the way, if you want to see what your mask looks like, you can click this button right here. And you can see my sky is protected here. That's a beautiful thing about this zone mask. It's really protecting my sky. If I paint out into the sky, it's not going to do anything. So click this button and it loads it back up as a selection, so I can keep painting over in these areas. Every time I lift my brush and paint again, you hear me say this all the time in my TK Friday tutorials, I'll add more of the effect. And I'm just going to go like this. Okay. And that looks pretty good. So let's take a look just at these darker tones up here. So here's the before and here's the after, but see how beautiful of a job that is done. So that's a case where the zone mask was perfect because it was in that range between zones 2 and 8, where the sky was, it was above zone 9. 9 and above is a perfect candidate for a luminosity mask. I'll show you a couple examples working with another zone mask and a luminosity mask, and then I'll move on to a color mask. And lastly, we'll go to a saturation vibrance mask, so don't miss any of this. Isn't this a cool train image? The stock images, the free stock images are really good on Adobe Stock. So that is a gold mine for us. Now, I'd like to sculpt this smoke a little bit by darkening some of the more shadowy tones in the smoke here. So what I will do first off is I want to darken, so I'm going to use my curves adjustment layer. Put a black mask on it to hide it because I'm going to click the multiply blend mode button and put this in a multiply blend mode to darken. And now let's use my little tester to see what kind of a mask I need. A luminosity mask or a zone mask. So I'll click on the zone mask button and I'm going to sample some of this shadowy tone in the smoke here and click OK, and let's see where that sits. Okay, that's sitting right there around a zone 6, so it follows the rule here. It's between a zone 2 and a zone 8, so it's a perfect candidate for a zone mask. And don't forget about this slider here, because you see right here, I don't want to select too much of this area in here, so what I'll do is I'm going to drag this slider to the right. And you notice when I do that, see how that area gets darkened in there a little bit? See, like right about there. So that's a pretty good zone. All these light areas are those shadow areas. Now, I'd like to tighten this selection up. So I'm going to take this slider and start to drag it into the left just to really isolate those shadow tones a little bit more to maybe somewhere right around there, and see how that smoke got really dark. So no effect will be added there. And now all I need to do is output that. So I'm going to output it to the black mask, painting with a white brush through a selection. And now I can simply sculpt that smoke by painting it on, and I think I'll use 20% opacity again. At 20% opacity, I'll just start painting. You see that? And I can just sculpt this smoke, darkening the areas that I want. Now, if I paint in here, nothing will happen because that was really dark in there. So I can just come in here, and remember, every time I lift that brush, I can't say this enough, and start to paint again, it'll get a little bit darker. But this is where you can really tailor this image to look just the way that you want it to look. And that's the excitement and the beauty of the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. I can't stress it enough. It's fantastic. And let me know in the comment section below what you think of the TK8 plugin for Photoshop. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. And I think I'm pretty good. I'm going to leave this up. Well, I might just get this here a little bit. Not much. But I think that's good. But check it out. Here is the before and here's the after. But isn't that cool? Makes the image start to come alive. And now what I want to do is see the darker shadows in the entire image, actually. I'd like to darken those up a little bit more. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to go with a curves adjustment layer. But you notice I have a selection because we can see the selection indicator. So what I need to do is deselect that selection because it'll put that selection onto the mask as soon as I click this. So click this button on the combo or this button on the CX panel, and that will deselect your selection. And now I can click on my curves adjustment, and that'll give me a curves adjustment layer right here. I'm going to, again, use a black mask and a multiply blend mode to darken. And now let me see what kind of a mask I need. So let's click right here on the zone mask, and let's pick some of the dark tones down in here and click OK. And as we can see here, I'm right around a zone 1, slightly over zone 1, so I think a luminosity mask is the best. So just X out of the zone mask, click on the luminosity mask button, and now we can isolate. Let's go to a darks 1. I don't want too broad of a mask. You can see I'd be getting too much dark area here. So let's go to a darks 2, and let's try a darks 3. There's a darks 3. Now, I don't have a tighten and lighten method here in a luminosity mask, but I can use my levels adjustment to tighten and lighten. So I'll click on that. And what I'll do is I'll take this highlight slider and drag it to the left just to lighten all those light areas up a little bit. And I'll take the shadow slider and move it to the right just to tighten everything up. It works kind of like the zone mask, but it is different. It's working with a levels adjustment. And I think that's good. So I'm going to output this to a black mask, painting with a white brush through a selection. And now let's try 20%. And I'm just going to paint on where I want. So I'm going to start painting in here. I'm going to go up. I'm going to go up to like 40% to give me a little bit more there. You can always change your opacity. And let's just test this area right here after I'm lifting the brush actually here and painting again in certain areas. But I like this method because you could make some areas darker, some areas not as dark. Let's check this area out that I just painted. Here's the before and here's the after. Okay, and I might even go up higher to 50% and just paint on these areas in here. And it's only targeting those shadowy type areas. And I'll just paint over all the shadowy areas here. I'm going to stay off the smoke up in here. But right in here, again, I'll be lifting my brush several times. If you want it stronger in certain areas, just lift and paint again. Down in here, over in here. How about like under this train here, right in here? I'll paint across here a couple times in here, maybe over here. But you get the idea. But you just paint it wherever you want it to go. Maybe on these little bushes down in here. So check it out. Here is the before and here is the after. If you ever want to see what your mask looks like, just have that layer selected and click the double arrow on the combo or the CX panel. And you can see what the mask looks like that you've painted. And there it is right there. Click it again and you see your image again. And again, here's the before and here is the after. And now let's move on to a color mask. Now, a color mask is pretty easy to determine when to use it. When you have a lot of certain isolated colors, that's a good time. Then you want a color mask. So what I want to do here is increase the red saturation on the train cars. This saturation up here is good, but these cars, I think they need more saturation in the red. The best mask for the job is the color mask, so click on the color mask button. Now you notice I do have a selection, but not a problem. I don't have to deselect it because as soon as I click on this color mask button, the selection goes away. So now I can just sample some of the red in here. So if I click right here and click OK, you see how it's selected that really nicely. So what I can do is, we have these adjustments here so we can narrow the range here. So let me drag this slider into the right and see what happens. Now see, that's eliminating some of that red up in there. So I'm going to drag it to the left a little bit more right there. And let me see if I pull this slider into the left. See, I can get more isolation when I do that, when I pull this in. That's too much. Maybe right about there. Now I can lighten it up here like this. And we can also adjust the feathering here. If I drag this into the left, see how it'll feather that in. So we can just really refine this mask. I don't want to include this area here, and I'm not going to paint this adjustment on. So what I'm going to do is grab my lasso tool. If you type L for the lasso tool, and what I want to do is just lasso around these red cars, just like this. Like that. And then if you click this button here, this is the mask button. If you click it, a feather selection dialog comes up, and you can have feathering on it if you want to, but if you click cancel, you'll get no feathering. And see, it's just selected those areas right there. Now you can see some little light areas here. This is not really going to affect anything, but you could click the black brush icon, and I'm going to go to 100%. I'm typing my 0 key to get to 100%, and I could paint that off of there. And up in here if I don't want any of this in here. Again, it really would not affect anything, to be honest with you, but you could do that if you need to. And now we need to output this. So I want to make an adjustment for the color. I'm going to bring up the saturation. So let's use a hue sat adjustment layer. So click this button right here. That'll give you a hue sat adjustment layer. And I like to still use the target tool, even though I've really targeted those colors. But you can see I could take the saturation and just pull it up here. I could do that very easily. Or if I double click saturation, that'll reset itself. Or use the target tool. I always like to use the target tool. So click on the target tool, and you can just click and start to drag it to the right. And you see how that just targets that red color, like right about there. And then you could also come back here and change this to master. And I could still pull up the master a little bit if I need to. But you notice this is not getting affected. So check this out. Here is the before, and here's the after. So it just brings up the saturation on those red cars. That's how easy it is to use a color mask. It'll just target the colors you want. So remember, it's a good mask to use whenever you have a lot of a certain color. You could just target that color. So that one's pretty easy to determine when to use it. Well, that's the color mask. Now when I look at this image, I love the cars now, but I wish the greens and the weaker colors in this image would come up, and that is where a vibrance mask comes in. So if you click this icon right here, you're going to open up your saturation vibrance mask. When do you use a vibrance mask? If you have colors that are kind of low and you want to bring up those colors, think vibrance. So vibrance will bring up weaker colors. And so I'm going to click on the left side here, which is vibrance. The right side is saturation. Right now it's on saturation 1. I'm going to click Vibrance 1. Notice that the train cars that I brought the saturation up are dark, so they're not targeted. So that's good. They're not going to get much saturation. So I'm going to click 2, and you'll notice they'll get even darker. And I'm going to click 3, all right? And this is good. Now, if I click 4, okay, so that doesn't look as good. It looks a little mottled up in here, too. These are JPEG images, by the way. But let's go back to a 3, and I think 3 is isolating just what I need to isolate here. Now, you'll find more times than not that the 3 and the 4 vibrance masks are going to be about the best masks to use for your vibrance adjustments. The lightest areas are the lowest saturated areas. The darker areas are more saturated areas. So we're targeting all of the low saturated areas. Now all we need to do is output this, and generally what you're going to want to use is a hue saturation adjustment. So click on this button right here. And now I'm just going to take the overall saturation and start to pull it to the right. And you notice it's only pulling up the weaker colors. It's not touching these red train cars. So just like that, I think that's pretty good. There's some color coming into the smoke here, but I'll show you how we can fix that. On the hue saturation layer we just made, click on the layer mask itself. Make sure you have a black brush. If you don't, you can just click this icon right here to get a black brush, or this icon in the CX panel. This is the combo panel, by the way. I'm using 100% opacity, nice soft edge brush, and now we can simply paint off any of that color that's in that smoke that we don't want in there. Just like that. Very simple, very easy. And just paint that color off, and that's all there is to it. So let's take a look. Here is the before, and here is the after. But see how that vibrance adjustment has really pulled up the colors. Now the image looks more in balance. One final image, one final example. This is going to be the saturation mask. Now, what is a saturation mask used for? First, let me click on this button right here, and this will open up our saturation and vibrance masks. We have vibrance on the left and saturation on the right. All the light tones on this mask are the areas that are very saturated. The darker tones are less saturated. And if I click on the double arrow icon, you can see this image is really oversaturated in not all the areas, but a lot of areas, like up in the sky and some of the reds in here, and down in this water here, and this yellow spot right over here. It's a really cool image, but it's a little bit oversaturated in certain areas. But let me show you how I like to use the saturation mask. Now, you could use a hue saturation adjustment layer to tone down the color with the saturation mask, or you can use the method that I'm going to show you now, which is my favorite method. I'll click this double arrow button again so we can see the mask itself. And of course, we have the different ranges here that we can go through. Here's saturation 1, here's 2, here's 3. So you could target the areas that you want. In my case, I think 1 is good because I want to target the sky and I want to target this water and this yellow area over here. And I think that's a good one. But check this out. You see this button here. Let's call it a hamburger menu. Click on this button and you see this icon right here. It looks like a paintbrush with red and gray. Okay, so click on this and check this out. Here's what you're going to get. A blank pixel layer in the saturation blend mode sets you up with a gray brush. Gray is for removing saturation. Red is to add saturation. So you just have to paint on here, okay? It's very simple and easy to do and very effective. Now, I highly recommend that you start out with a 20% opacity. You can always adjust from there on the brush. So I'm going to type my 2 key to get 20% opacity. And now what I want to do is remove some of the oversaturated red areas. Watch, and I'll just paint across here. And you see how that saturation just starts to come down? And if you overdo an area, I'll show you what you can do. Like, for instance, up here in the sky, if I get rid of some of this blue, if I get rid of too much, we have a gray and a red swatch, right? The red will add saturation, the gray removes, so I just remove. So if I type my X key and I flop this to a red, now I can just paint some of that saturation back. So if I messed up in an area and I want a little bit more saturation, like right in here, I can get it. Okay, so now I'm going to type my X key and go to gray again, and I just want to tone down some of the water saturation in here. Just painting across here. And again, the same principle holds. If you lift and repaint, you'll build up. So right in here, and now here's this yellow here. Now let me take this down in here a little bit. And say I take it too far, type my X key, and I can just add a little bit more back in there. And say I want to bring this saturation up here. I'm still on red. I'll make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm just using my left bracket key here. And I can just paint over this like that and bring up some of that saturation there. And just like that, here's the before and here is the after. Again, the before and the after. But that is the saturation mask, and that is such a cool tool to work with. And let me know in the comments section what you think. In fact, I'm going to switch to my gray brush again. I'm typing my X key, and I think I'm a little hot here, so I'll hit that there a couple times. But there you go. That's a saturation mask. And I should say this, that was a saturation mask combined with saturation painting. Painting with either a red or a gray brush in the saturation blend mode. And you are painting on a blank pixel layer. So that's what happened when I clicked on that hamburger menu and chose that option for saturation painting. Well, there it is, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's masking workshop. Hey, if you did, please give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you're not yet a subscriber to this channel, please subscribe. Click that bell notification icon. Then every time I upload a new tutorial, you'll be notified. I want to thank each and every one of you for joining me today in the Joy of Editing with Dave Kelly. And I'll see you all right here next time. But until then, happy editing.